Catherine B.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Catherine B. and the Echo Revolution. I'm sitting with two major shapeshifters, and these two incredible people are also my neighbors and fellow beekeepers. So I want to welcome Howard and Bianca to the show. Thank you guys so much.
Catherine.
Thanks
hey,
for having
babies. Yeah, we're earth workers, man. We are out there in the soil all the time. And the reason that I wanted Howard and Bianca on the show today is that, you know, we all talk about growing food, and a lot of permaculture say it's easy. The work that the three of us do is not easy. It's backbreaking, it's exhausting, and there's nothing more satisfying in the world. It truly is. When you start getting into the physicality of what we do, it changes everything. I really feel that when we're in the earth and we're working it, we are changing our epigenetics, and we are somehow connecting to this power of earth, and it absorbs into us. Do you feel that sometimes?
When I'm addicted to not wearing gloves, because I really feel it. I really feel that, and I know what you're talking about. Yeah. Connecting to that energy of the earth, of course.
Yeah.
My friend Greg is saying, "Well, you're spending your entire weekend, both days, like non-stop in the garden," and I'm saying, because I love it. Yeah. It's not work for me. I love it.
Yeah. Gardeners are happier people.
And there's
studies have been done on that, actually. There's something in the soil that actually combats depression and all kinds of things.
It's a microbe that causes serotonin to be released, and we're happier. That's why gardens are happy.
It's amazing.
And it's fun. I want to tell your businesses, especially, Howard is his business is Urban Habitat, and what is your tagline? One hedge.
My tagline is "Think beyond the hedge."
Yeah, man. Think beyond the hedge.
That's kind of born out of South Florida's addiction to really lame choices of hedge material that just addict the consumer to this cycle of mass consumption, of maintenance. You know, when you plant a 70-foot tall tree in an 8-foot space and pack it with fertilizer, you know that they're going to be coming to trim that tree every 3 weeks.
You got
and
it.
over 10 years, that's $25,000 and a big fat carbon footprint.
Yeah, and you know what? It's not your fault, consumers. It is not your fault, because your landscapers want your plants to live so that, you know, they can come back, like Howard said, and maintain them. But this show is really a call to action today about how important our soil, our topsoil is, especially. And Howard's going to explain why these beautiful living beings in the room are very important to us, and how almost all of them are 90% extinct. And we're going to get really into what you can do as a consumer. But the main thing you got to realize is that when we cover up earth correctly, and we mulch her, and we feed her, and we give back what we took away, we can change the outcome of the next couple of generations. Bianca is a artist, and again, she's a world famous artist that has influenced Fashion Week in New York City, and she hates when I talk like this. We're going to be showing some of her pictures on our YouTube video of this class. But Bianca is a classic example of what Howard's talking about. When we met, she came to my house for one of my parties, and I was growing, and she was completely into her art and had a beautiful property. But when she saw my kale plant, she had her moment.
I was done. I was like, I have to do this.
An edible revolution.
Edible. I could grow my own food. Fantastic. I loved it.
It's like the lights went on. I could just tell. And it was so fascinating, because everyone comes to my garden parties and pretty much walks on the kale. But Bianca was mesmerized. And I could tell. And ever since then, we just became green comrades. And then through Bianca, I met Howard. Well, actually, I met Howard. He was coming to my party, or I can't remember. But anyway, it was one of those, oh, my God, we're all related here.
Yeah.
Bianca is a classic example of taking a property that you would think not a lot might grow on. And she has created...
Amazing, right?
Amazing. An artistic statement, because she is an artist. But again, we're doing all this for personal reasons. But the main thing is, I think we have to see that this world is becoming a desert, that because of our soil or lack of soil, we are also depleting its water sources and its need for energy. So let's go to a video of why we do the hard work.
I am the soil. I am in the hills and in the valleys, the farms, the orchards. Without me, humans could not exist. But you treat me like dirt. Do you realize that I am just a thin skin on this planet? And that I'm actually alive? Full of organisms that grow your food? But I am broken, aching, overused, sick. Because of you. You have withered me away to less than half of what I used to be just over 100 years ago. Are you paying attention? I am turning to dust. So maybe you could treat me with a little more respect. I suppose you still want to eat, right?
Yeah, I think that the thing that just drives me nuts is when people call my soil with its living families of microherds and organisms dirt. Like, to a gardener, dirt is a dirty word. Dirt is what happens on those asphalt roads.
Well, it's
out
like
there.
calling me a landscaper. For me, landscaping's a dirty word.
Oh, let me read your bio before we go any further, okay? Because this is pretty impressive. Okay. My dear friend Howard Tonkin creates habitats within the urban environment to sustain endangered species of plants, birds, butterflies, animals, and I'm going to say people, because we are a little endangered, the ones that want to stay green in this chemical era, as well as the less charismatic animals and creatures that are crucial to these ecosystems, which I think is really cool that you mentioned, because the snakes and...
But so many people take this for granted. They don't, or they want to kill these creatures,
Right.
these small organisms that, see, people worry about a butterfly because it's got wings that a human being can identify with as being something pretty. So we want to save butterflies and appreciate them. And that's great. But what about these little bugs that we think are ugly, so we want to kill them? But what birds do they feed?
Yeah, I think
What animals up the food chain? And then we start losing these small animals. We start losing biodiversity. You know, in 2065, birds will go extinct in North America. Do you really think we're far behind that?
Why 2065?
Because we've lost 1% of the bird population for each year of my life. If you keep going down that line, in 2065, birds are gone in North America.
Wow. I don't want to live in a world without birds.
Think about that.
Yeah.
Think about that.
No.
That we're on a trajectory that birds will be like dinosaurs. That Bianca's son will tell his children about how once there were birds that flew in the sky. That's the path we're on. Very real, very real. And people worry about Cecil the lion. They don't think about these little bugs and creatures and butterflies and birds and something that doesn't make a great Facebook post.
Right.
But they don't think about that's going on in South Florida right now. People don't walk into Home Depot and look at a plastic flamingo and think, hey, I've never seen a flamingo. Why is that?
Mm-hmm. I think it's really fascinating that we have more pictures of nature than actual nature, and plastic flamingos and plastic flowers. If you go to West Elm or any of the big interior design companies, it's all images of what was, not what can be.
And how important all these little bugs that are really not very attractive to look at, but you know, when you pick up a handful of dirt and you got no bugs in there, you have a problem.
Right.
And which is the case in most places. And so there's some kind of a yuck factor involved with people gardening, because they think that, you know, if they pick up a handful of dirt and there's some bugs in there, they go, ooh, yuck, you know, I don't want to touch that.
See, the way that I feel is like maybe the aliens think that we're an unattractive little bug. And that makes me think, in the big picture of things, maybe we're an unattractive little bug, and that inspires me to take care of unattractive little bugs.
Yeah, that's right.
Because you never know,
It's an
things can
interesting point of
change.
view.
It's like the Matrix. Well, okay. So again, going back to the soil, if we take care of the soil, we take care of those bugs that are not so pretty, not Facebook worthy, but they are so important to the birds and to the rest of the ecosystems. Howard has reached into communities to create an awareness of native and endangered species. As you can tell, what I love about this man is his passion and his pig. He has a little piggy, Waldo, we'll talk about later. All right, let's focus on your, I'll never get through this. You've created over 100 residential and commercial habitats.
I've lost track at this point. I've honestly lost track. I know I cracked 100 like a while ago. I don't know how many we're at this point.
And I'm so proud of 100 people in Miami supporting it, because these are beautiful, but they do not look like your traditional suburban landscapes. And that I love, because it breaks up the neighborhood. Although the realtors in Miami hate it because they want to just continuously, spin our prices and our properties. Urban Habitat is now the largest supplier of native plants in South Florida and is spearheading a revolution in landscaping and environmental activism. I want to be you when I grow up.
Thank you. It seems strange to be saying that, but the biggest grower told me, you're it. You're moving more plants than anybody else.
Wow.
A big part of that is because I do what the Native Plant Society and everybody wants, which is plant a lot of small plants with a massive amount of biodiversity. Mm-hmm. So people really need to consider divorcing themselves from these ideas of instant gratification of big things that look perfect right now, because plants are not furniture. And if gardens are planted with a massive amount of biodiversity, and from really small plants from the beginning, that's how to have a much healthier, better ecosystem in your garden.
And that's why I started my movement, the Garderitarians, because plants are, there's a consciousness to them that we all know as gardeners. Will sound crazy if we get into that right now, but the truth is we put those plants in the soil, and the one thing they can't do other than when they are seedlings is move around. And so we have this responsibility to realize that they're not objects, and that they are simply something that is alive and needs love and nurturing, and is an important conscious part of if it's in your yard, it's part of your family.
And the answer to almost every problem is biodiversity.
Yes.
Do you know the average American garden has 5 species? That's the average garden in Florida. And so what we're looking at is a green desert. Mm-hmm. That might be something beautiful to our eyes,
okay.
but to all the birds that have been coming
and
here for
thousands
of years,
the ugly bugs.
And the ugly bugs, there's nothing left to eat.
Right.
Because what can you do with St. Augustine grass apart from look at it?
Yeah. Well, and so we're going to get into some really great alternatives. When Howard creates these urban environments to sustain in endangered species, excuse me one second. Okay, so I copied this twice. When you create these environments and people start seeing these animals back into their properties, and what do they say? Do they realize what they've done, that they're helping Earth?
There's different reasons why people do work with me, and it's usually when they're making a transition in their lives already before they've met me. I kind of often facilitate that transition, or actually I often am a peacemaker between couples and resolve their issues when they're having problems with their landscape and it's not working for them. But what was the question?
Well, when I'm saying, like, when you create these eco environments with biodiversity and you bring in all these...
Oh, right, with the animals. Okay,
yeah,
so...
do people start to notice, or...
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I have my tricks. If somebody has a kid, I make sure that I get my butterfly plants that are going to bring butterflies in the same day.
Okay.
But... I said to a client recently, I said, this is a powerful place, and owls are very spiritual animals. and you wait till the owls show up, because they will. And then we were standing there having an argument about something because, when you're working on a really major project and there's a lot of passion involved, and 3 owls came and landed on a branch and looked at us. And I said, I told you so.
Was it because of a plant that you planted, or what?
It's because when you build a forest and you have 180 species of plants and you have all these organisms showing up, the energy and the vibration, you can feel it. The animals feel it. The animals show up. I mean, we established in this forest in Biscayne Park a colony of Atala butterflies in 3 weeks.
Wow.
They're there.
Oh,
Within
that's
3
really
weeks, we got them
encouraging.
there.
That's really
It is,
encouraging.
because I've brought them into Miami Shores and Biscayne Park. They were not there before.
Wow, that's wonderful. I'm trying to bring the malachite butterfly back right now, and I've been going out to the old horse trails and taking all these native Burkham plants, but so far, nothing. We'll see what happens.
I've never seen one. I want them as well.
I found them. They're all over this ancient...
Really?
Yeah, right over here on Griffin. I'll take you to my secret spot.
Okay.
When I'm also a mini landscaper, but I do it different. I teach as I go, and my projects take a very long time. I want you to teach me everything, because on these jobs, I'm now bringing in from Howard a lot of native planting, but I focus, and Bianca and I focus a little bit more on food, incorporating that. And then what would you suggest for grass choices? Like, I'm working on this one project right now, and I've used purslane, I've used peanut, but
No peanut.
Okay.
Peanuts from Argentina. I'm a bit of a purist when it comes to what's going on in South Florida, and we've introduced so many invasive species. We get an invasive species in South Florida every 30 days. There's a new invasive.
So the peanut is invasive.
Well, it's not that it's invasive. It's that it's from Argentina.
The peanut is a peanut grass.
Is that
we
the
use down
perennial
here.
peanut?
There's
you're talking
wonderful.
about?
Peanut,
The
yeah.
number one choice I would recommend as a lawn alternative is creeping Charlie, which is fog fruit. It's the host plant for the endangered white peacock butterfly, which my friend Stanley's garden has just dozens of peacock butterflies all over it right now. It's beautiful just to see so many of them.
Okay.
That's what Roundup was invented to destroy, because the last thing that the big oil companies and the manufacturing industry and Home Depot, the last thing they want is a sustainable lawn that requires no mowing, because then we wouldn't need any more of their products and services and their oil and their machines and their lawnmowers imported from China and all these things. We wouldn't need that anymore. But what we so desperately need to do is to reduce our carbon footprints. Because if we don't change our habits, we're on a trajectory to self-destruction.
Yeah.
And when you look at the United States, and you see that 60% of the United States is now suburbs, we have a dead zone of lawn that is an area the size of 8 New Jerseys. We have an area the size of 5 New Jerseys of road, of asphalt. We have an area of 4 New Jerseys of concrete. And when you start looking at this landmass and this unsustainable path that we're on, if we don't radically change our approach to suburbs, if we don't make suburbs a place where nature and birds and animals and bees can coexist, we have no future.
Well, and this is going to be the revolutionary challenge for today, is get in under the radar. I want anyone in any part of the world that's watching this YouTube to find out what native plants are to your soil, which is going to create native soil, which is going to create the native bugs, and go out there and plant some. And if there's food parts, bring the food in. My suggestion too is don't go overboard immediately so that you get in trouble with your county and city. Get in under the radar, because this revolution is all about not fighting the machine, but working around it. So take responsibility now for your land, for your suburban grasses. We don't need lawns. We need food to feed 9 billion people. What were you going to say?
I was going to interject when you made the point about the peanut. And what I wanted to explain is when we constantly... Okay, so human beings for thousands of years have been coming up with plants that work in landscaping that are pest-free. That means nothing will eat that plant. that means that we create this green desert. So when you constantly import plants into an environment that don't belong in that environment, you're setting up a situation where the animals and the organisms around those plants would take millions of years of evolution to catch up to being able to use those plants.
Okay.
And so what we're doing by
Fascinating.
bringing in plants like the peanut that nothing will eat, nothing will sustain from that plant, we're basically putting down something that may as well be carpet. Whereas in the same place, we could plant something native that's going to have the right organisms to enrich the soil, to pollinate our fruit trees and our vegetables, Bianca's vegetables. And that's how we have a healthy ecosystem. And on top of that, when you go back to the biodiversity, that's how you avoid having any infestations of pests. Because if you have a massive amount of biodiversity, you have no concentration of any one pest.
And I want to get into Bianca's vegetables, because she's become an expert on food culture. But the other thing that I find fascinating, for example, in Florida right now, we're dealing with the African snail, which is this huge snail. And I've heard, again, not an expert, but the sacred science of it is that when we've depleted our natural predators and our natural microorganisms, and these really, really aggressive forms of predators come in, it's a sign that we are on the way to extinction. And it's happening in all bell curves, in the mammal world, in the insect world, and maybe even in the human world. So this might just be about soil today, but it's really about extinction that we're talking about. And with the biodiversity, let's talk about, Howard is not a food person as much as you and I are.
Yeah.
Let's talk about food, and then we'll go back to these microorganisms in Florida. And I'd love, Howard, for you to explain these plants. So this is my dear friend Bianca. She is a yoga teacher, was a yoga student of mine, and now we share all the time yoga concepts and thought. On the last show, we were just talking about how yoga sometimes is this really transitional vehicle into green consciousness and into the earth again. And I find it fascinating that so many yoga people get involved in this work.
Yeah.
Bianca,
it's a natural inclination, I think. But it's the first step almost, because you become more aware of your body. You create this awareness, and then you become more aware of the food you eat and of what goes into your body. And then all of a sudden, the awareness just starts to spiral, because from the food it leads to, what am I doing with my life?
And
what
with
am
me
I
from
doing?
the other direction.
Right,
the same
exactly.
things.
It's all
Right.
about creating awareness, and yoga is a good vehicle to start doing that.
Yeah.
Starting with your own body and creating that awareness.
Emily's a yoga teacher too, and she was saying the same thing, how it's just like you start to purify through hatha, and then all of a sudden you're in the earth, and then all of a sudden you're doing
It
these jobs that you
extends into
love.
all areas of life, really.
Yeah. But you're an
It's
artist.
life transforming. I always say that. It's not as obvious to beginning yoga students, because mostly they feel the pain and they go, oh my God, I cannot do this, and they're struggling and whatnot. But it is really transformative if you give it a chance. It's amazing.
Yeah, body, mind, and spirit, definitely. But you always, what I love about Bianca, and Howard agrees, she has this artistic sense to everything that she does. We do beehive events, and last time Bianca from the garden gave us a beautiful garden tour of all her edibles and natives, and then we did water kefirs, and we just finished a workshop on sauerkrauts and microgreens, and we'll be doing more. I think our next one is going to be on sourdough bread with water kefir. So she takes it from the garden to the table, and it's all through this small property that she has in our neighborhood. So let me tell you a little bit more about Bianca and why she's so passionate about what she does. Bianca Pratorius began reevaluating her relationship with food, health, and gardening the way many of us have. And I guess you could call this the necessity. That necessity is the mother of personal evolution. Bianca says if it hadn't been for her imperative as a mother to be to better care for her newborn son, she might have chosen a more traditional life, an unexamined lifestyle. But she didn't. And she found, like so many others, that by questioning knowledge, she opened her mind to so many different processes. She healed her son, healed herself, and nagging health issues, and found joy and soul-satisfying connections learning about life through organic gardening. And I like to feel that I had a part in that.
Yes, you did.
Thank
Big
you.
part.
Now she's really good. I mean, my garden, I won't even look at my garden right now because hers is perfect and mine is, well, I'm doing the radio show. I'm trying to save the earth, okay? So my garden's taking a hit. All right. So let's talk about your property and why you spend so much time there.
Yeah. When we purchased the property, it was basically barren. There was nothing there. It was landfill, like so many properties, urban properties in South Florida. And it was just concrete fill. No dirt even. Wow. There was nothing.
No dirt, no soil.
No dirt, no soil, no nothing. So I went, and this was 13 years ago now. So I went the traditional route first. I hired a landscaper to put in the obvious bad choices, as Howard mentioned. It wasn't you, no.
It wasn't Howard.
Would never have been Howard. And unfortunately, I wish, well, you weren't doing that 13 years ago. No. So, but in any event, we did that. And it was beautiful, but it was a maintenance nightmare. And all the obvious choices, everything that you see on every corner in South Florida.
Boring,
exactly.
And
so
cheap.
And cheap.
And
not
cheap.
Always, though.
Not always so cheap.
Cheap for the landscaper.
Yeah,
it's
expensive for
yes,
us.
Exactly.
That's the way it's designed.
So over time, my garden, I kind of took charge of my garden, and I went, you know what? I have to make this the way I want it to be. I have to treat this like a piece of art. And so that's what I started to do. And I first fell in love with succulent plants.
As we do.
Yes, aloes and agaves, because their structures, they're very architectural structures, really appealed to me. And, I wanted to incorporate as many as I could into the landscape. And sustainable. Yeah, very, very little water. They need no water. So I started by just ripping out all the grass that I had and just doing sort of a xeriscape where there's no water required. All these plants are doing really well.
And for 10 years before I met Bianca, I would loved her garden and would walk past it admiring it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so he knew my garden
synergy.
before he knew me.
Yeah.
Oh,
and
I
then,
didn't know that.
Yeah.
See? I learned something new.
And then I, at some point, after years of then doing this, I think I met Howard before I met you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I met Howard at a farm stand, like a farmer's market, and he had his urban habitat stand there, and he had a couple of succulents. And
That's
I
how I met
immediately
Howard
went,
too.
I love this. Who's this guy? I want to know who this is. This is amazing.
Bianca was my first supporter. She was my first, when I was starting out right at the beginning, she would come and buy plants from me and kind of put some food on the table a couple of weeks there.
Yeah.
Well, and the thing is, I mean, when I tried doing what you do when I came out of LA, and nobody was ready for it. So you being supported back then, that was impressive. Now the world's getting more green.
I have a lot to thank whitefly for.
Yeah, right.
That's a huge disease that's wiped out so many of the commercial properties. So
then I increased my collection of succulents, which I had lots of them, but I increased my collection thanks to Howard, and they are still there. I still love them. I still appreciate them. So then I met you, and I said, oh my God, now I have to grow food. So it slowly started to change into this really incredible polyculture now, where I have natives and succulents and vegetables and everything sort of mixed in together.
And it's all healthy because it's biodiverse.
It's all very healthy.
And because we have bees, and we just went to bee college last weekend, so.
Yeah, and I also started to build up my soil, and, that was probably the most important aspect of it.
Yeah, let's talk about this. When our soil is built up and we have these microorganisms, you actually brought in a book on this.
I brought a book, which is one of my favorite books. It's called Teeming with Microbes, and that's kind of a play on word, I guess, because you could spell it T-E-E.
Oh, okay.
Teeming, or in this case, T-E-A-M-I-N-G, meaning teaming up with microbes to really build the soil and enhance what Mother Nature knows how to do to begin with, and not try to destroy by putting in, chemicals and fertilizers and insecticides and
having
whatnot.
bare earth.
And
or having bare
the
earth.
thing about microbes and why I love gardening and then healthcare is that when we talk about microbes in the soil, we're also talking about microbes in our own bodies. And so when
It's
you
the
start,
same.
when you start understanding microbe culture, all that scary yucky part goes away, and you get really into soil vermiculture, soil microbes, and then also our own gut and what happens. And when we're eating from soil that is filled with all these wonderful microbes, we're getting so much more nutrition, because those are the organisms that break up the calcium and the things that go in. Everyone in America thinks calcium comes from cows. It comes from the soil.
Yeah.
So
what happens is that every plant, and when we think of plants and what they do, we think of the stuff that they have their little roots under the soil, and they suck up all the nutrients and bring them up into the plants. But what most people don't realize is that plants, through their process of photosynthesis, create a lot of energy that they then use to create these chemicals that they release out through their roots. And those chemicals are very particular to each plant. And every plant attracts the kind of fungi and bacteria that it needs.
I love it.
So they all... The particular, whatever billions of, different species of bacteria, certain ones are attracted to certain plants because of what they release through their roots.
And the fungi is the plant internet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then so the bacteria and the fungi come there, right? Particular kinds. And then because they get actually eaten up by the slightly larger nematodes and protozoa, and as soon as they eat them up, they release the nitrogen and all the stuff that we need, that the plants need, into the soil for the plants to absorb. So it's kind of almost pointless to dump fertilizers onto your plants, because what happens is it just bypasses everything and just leaches into the water, the water table.
And then xenohormesis does not happen. And xenohormesis is a wonderful secondary effect of plant health. When you actually stress a plant, it becomes stronger. But if you continuously feed it and fertilize, it becomes very weak and it won't self-regulate, just like us taking vitamins when we don't need to.
Yeah.
But tangent. Go on.
Right. So then you have what we all know about the food chain, right? Mm-hmm. And it's the same thing underground. There's the little bacteria that get eaten by the nematodes and the protozoa that then get eaten by the bugs that we need in the soil that then, create bug poop. And they,
we were talking about whale poop on last show.
Right. And they enrich the soil. That's what we want. So if even one element of that is missing, you have a deficient soil, because then the process can't happen.
Right.
So the most important thing is to get all the right bacteria and nematodes into the soil in order for everything to thrive and for the web to be complete.
Yeah, and then also our vermiculture, our worm culture, bringing in the larger insects and animals that live underground that are actually beneficial to the earth. So why don't we take a video break right now, and see more about how important our soil and our toil in the soil is.
I found myself a desk jockey, overworked, fat, sick, inflamed, and basically my doctors just threw pills at me every time I came in and said that I was sick and I needed to eat less and run more. And so more of that made me more fat, more sick. It wasn't until I took my health into my own hands, started living in a clean way, the way that our ancestors used to, going back to our roots, that the fat just melted off, and all of a sudden I had this incredible vitality and energy that I'd never experienced before.
The truth is, we have all the power. Each and every one of us makes a choice with every purchase we make. As above, so below. As we start making better decisions and taking the toxic poisons out of our lives and our environment, we start to come to life again. This gives us the personal power to get our energy back, get more active and involved in the world around us. It helps us start changing our personal surroundings to better support our lives, our planet, and our collective future.
The most powerful tool you have to change your health, to change the health of the environment, to change our economy, to literally change our whole world is your fork. What you put on that every day, 3 times a day, is the most important decision you have to make. You need to vote with your fork, and you get to vote every day, 3 times a day. So make that vote count. Count for you, count for your family, count for your children, and count for our planet.
You know, you and I are the consumer. We have the power. And we're voting with our money every time we make a purchase, every time we eat a meal. Are we going to support the companies that are poisoning us and our kids and the planet, or are we going to support the companies that are actually doing the right thing?
It can feel so challenging when you're bombarded with all this information about the harmful things and the toxic things and doomsday with the climate and all this scary information. But what we can remember is that there are a lot of people out there doing awesome things, and we can seek out their information, buy their products, support them, share what they have to say, and we can all play a role in helping restore a sense of balance, consciousness, and mindfulness in our environment and how we live with it.
One move corrects everything, and that's the return to the sacred. That nature is sacred, that rocks are sacred, that plants and trees are sacred. That one step of reverence for all life can correct so many imbalances in our thoughts, words, and deeds. Simply moving forward into the future with reverence can create sustainability. It can create an amazing wonder and awe and appreciation for all those amazing technologies that we have, but also begin that thought process that puts us in a balance so that that technology doesn't hurt the earth, but can actually help the earth.
And ultimately, this isn't about recreating or reenacting some ancient history. This is about accessing modern technology, but recognizing that we are this ancient being living in a modern society. The end result is you can have it all. You can have the happiness and the satisfaction and the contentment and not have to give up the technology and the convenience and the other wonderful things that we have created for ourselves.
As we wake up and we find more clarity, you find that doing the right thing just gets easier.
The first step is to give your body food. Food that has been recognized for thousands of years, food that is healthy and comes from nature.
I see so many people who are tired, who are moody, who have joint pain, that they just think this is normal for them. And then when they go back and they start to eat like we did thousands of years ago, basically they're returning to their origins, it's a transformation. They feel amazing.
So as you're eating fresh whole foods, you're getting your food locally from a butcher, a farmer, and your plastic levels go down, watch your energy and watch your weight. Because what happens is, once those levels go down, usually the body weight goes down too.
I mean, we need to disrupt the food system. We need to completely disrupt it. And the best way to do that is through buying into your local decentralized food producers and food suppliers, through community supported agriculture, through farmers markets, through local co-ops that sell local foods. And sometimes it's a little bit more expensive, but you know what? The quality's better, you need less of it.
The reason why junk food is so cheap is because corn, soy, and wheat and other monocrops are subsidized by the government. How about we take those funds and we put them into local organic farms to grow healthy food for healthy people? There are people out there funding initiatives to create exactly that change. They need our support.
I believe that the power of change happens in community, that people banding together, doing things together makes a huge difference. It's the power of social networks to change people's behavior, to get people aware of the lies that they're being told by the food industry and our government so that they can in fact change what they're doing. They can change what's happening in their homes. They can take back their kitchen. I think it has to happen where we live. It has to happen in our homes, in our kitchens, in our workplaces, in our schools, where we eat, live, work, play, and pray. That's where this has to happen.
Wow. Okay, so we now have this real call to action for our soil. Howard, what are we going to plant on it? And what happens when we plant one tree? How much? We've been talking about the soil, but what about the air and the oxygen? What?
Well, an example of that would be bald cypress, which is a tree a lot of people say, oh, we don't want that in Miami because we don't want to live in a swamp. But we're
gonna be.
We're gonna be if we're not careful. Yeah. But what people don't realize is that, for example, one bald cypress tree produces enough oxygen in a year, in its growing season, to sustain 10 people for a year. Another example would be the slash pines. In the old South, when people were sick, they would take them to the slash pine forests to heal in the greater oxygen and energy of the forests. And they knew this in the 1800s and the 1900s. And then now we've cut down 97% of that slash pine forest. And in South Florida,
we've got one here. We've got one left.
We're down to 2,370 acres of that forest, meaning the most imperiled forest on planet Earth is that South Florida slash pine. It's why I do what I do.
Wow. Can you actually tell us about all of these endangered? You guys, if you're watching on YouTube, this is really, we don't want this to become a museum of extinct species, because they all have a right to be here. So Howard's going to walk us through and talk about some of these beautiful native plants that he's brought in.
Well, this plant back here behind me.
Show it to the camera.
It's called... Where am I going? This way?
Yeah, right here.
Over here?
Say hi.
This is sea lavender. Now, sea lavender is one of these plants in South Florida that's basically extinct. It's extinct on the mainland. It's in a couple of places in the Keys. Sea lavender is a beautiful coastal species. It's a little delicate. So what happened in the 70s and 80s in South Florida, we had just whatever you want to do, coastal development. It was a tax haven for Canadians. They just clear cut all the beaches and replaced it with junk. And so we've lost all of these coastal species. But sea lavender is wonderful in a landscaping application because it's got such an elegant character to it. So it's a really beautiful plant, great for bees, great for butterflies. And if you're planting something that's going extinct in a suburban environment, well, guess what? If everybody's planting it, it's no longer going extinct.
Exactly, and that's what we all have to do. Wherever you live, find out where your Howard is. Find out who can carry native plants, even seeds. I found seeds for the swamp milkweed, which I thought was just about extinct.
I want to know about that.
Yeah,
because
I planted some for you. I was going to surprise you, but I always give it away. The slash pine, like you said, was 90% of our...
Well, originally in South Florida, we had 187,000 acres of pineland rockland, which is a globally unique habitat which grew down the backbone of what unfortunately became the Metropolitan Corridor because it was the higher land.
Oh,
so
I see.
Basically, Fort Lauderdale and Miami are built on top of this slash pine forest. So the great hardwood hammock to pineland rockland transitional forests, which all the big animals like the bears and the lions and all this stuff, that's 100% gone. There's no more of that. It's gone forever. Just like the flamingos, except there's like 100 of those that just came back to the Everglades.
Wow.
But yeah, there's 117 flamingos living in the Everglades right now. But the slash pine, is now down to those 2,370 acres approximately, except I've added a few acres in Miami and Fort Lauderdale.
Congratulations.
But there's great debate as to, is slash pine one species or is the denser a subspecies? Is it conditional environmentally? And I side with the biology scientists at the universities in South Miami, which say that there are 4 species of slash pine. Okay. And that's something that I've witnessed. So this tree behind me, this tree right here, the person that brought these seedlings of this tree
it looks
to
like
the,
a
to the
slash
grower,
pine.
looks like a slash pine, but when it grew, see, a slash pine will come out of the ground looking like a grass, just like a tuft of grass. And that's how you identify a denser as opposed to a slash pine regular.
What we're going to do is we're going to give Howard's his Facebook and his .com, so that if you want to learn more or even hire Howard to talk at your event about these plants and bring them in and get inspired to see these incredible beings, I would love that. I don't mean to cut you off on that. But I wanted to talk about this water migration. You had mentioned the Everglades, and you speak about water migration.
Water mitigation. Water mitigation means changing our relationship with water. We need to think about how we relate to water in South Florida.
The last show was just all on this.
Well, if we don't change how we move water in South Florida, how we handle water. See, we're in a situation right now, this year, unlike any other year, right now, sea level at high tide. Yesterday when I was kayaking, the floodgates were open, but the water is not going out anymore. The only reason the canals were draining in Miami prior to this year has been the gravity that we have always relied on. Well, now the sea level is the same height as the canals, and the canals no longer drain. So if the higher up cities think that the solution is putting water into those canals in a more efficient manner, they're condemning the people in the lower areas to more imminent flooding. What we have to do in the higher up areas is keep the water in those areas and put the water back down into the aquifer.
And
so
the
we're
way
talking
that
about
we can keep the water is through planting and through reestablishing.
Through planting, through changing the shape of the landscape, through channeling water into French drains or drop down areas, reducing hardscape, less concrete, less asphalt, more green space, creating areas where we have a drop down of cypress and grasses, allowing water to collect in areas and percolate into the ground. Right. This is what they're doing in Broward County. It's wonderful what you see in Broward County. You get to Miami-Dade and it's 30 years behind.
Yeah.
Come
on, Miami. Come on.
Miami has about 20 years of growing up to do, and it has no more time to do it.
Well, and this is where we got to break out. And you go into these native plants and we break these systems. Do you get in trouble with the city? Because I got in trouble with the city, and now I've rectified it.
I'm in trouble with Biscayne Park right now.
Because you're planting native?
Because they think that I should have an 8-foot setback on landscapes that I've done previously that have a 5 or 6 foot setback. And it's kind of a, do you want to put me out of business moment, because I don't have the funds or the capacity to go around re-landscaping my projects. And as I said before, they're not furniture.
Right,
when I started my business, I got run out of Miami Shores by the city manager of Miami Shores who yelled at me, and he told me, your slash pines have no business in Miami Shores. Miami Shores is a green village. And your slash pines and your Arizona style landscaping has no place in Miami Shores. And I said to him, but
it's not
Miami Shores is built out of slash pine. Slash pine is what this forest was. But the thing is, we're dealing with such ignorance that these trees have been gone for so long. People don't even know. Florida. People don't know the difference between an Australian pine, a slash pine. They've never seen a slash pine. They think that what's indigenous to Miami is palm trees. They really have no connection to what was originally here. And what I learned from doing farmers markets and reaching out into communities, you know, if I work at Government Center downtown, those people are not hating the environment. They just don't know.
Well, that's the thing. I think people just don't know.
People just don't know.
And I think what Bianca could do, well, she doesn't have any chickens.
No, just bees.
And a wild husband.
Yeah.
Totally illegal. No, I'm only kidding. I love you, Garth. The reason I'm bringing up our challenges is that if you want to go full on off the grid, like Val said, get your wild on, and you want to plant Howard's plants right on the variances, or you want to do a statement like Bianca, who has food in her front yard, you can go and claim your property as an intellectual, artistic statement. And that's why I wanted Bianca on the show, because she inspires me to see landscaping and return to nature as an art statement. And once these plants are in, to move them is really hard to do. But, think about that. And that also comes to how you live and how your life is art. Your life is an artistic expression. So don't be this commercial Home Depot. Take it to the original source of our inspiration for moving to Miami, the beauty of what it was and what it could be.
I think the thing is, like what you were saying about how all these people don't know about the native plants and everything here. I think a lot of people don't even know, like, they're not rooted within themselves. They don't even know what's native to them, what's good for them.
This comes back to that yoga.
The yoga.
So within,
and it's also, I think the biggest part of it, I've thought about this a lot, because you've got to look at why a mass extinction is going on. Mm-hmm. And it's always for several reasons. Miami's transient. There's a lot to do with people's cultural South American, Caribbean heritage, where they're sort of afraid of nature. The culture of painting around the trees white and concrete and all of that. There's been such an abuse of the Everglades, but always for 100 years, this idea of like manipulating and controlling this environment. But I think the worst thing of all in South Florida is this desperate, absolute idea to make it a tropical place, and it's a subtropical place. And what we've done is made it into something completely foreign to what it actually was. And we're right at the edge of mass extinction, not just for South Florida, but for thousands of different birds that migrate through South Florida.
We have a lot of cleaning up to do.
Yeah, and to just get back to this connection that you're just talking about, I have this funny story where a friend comes over to my house, and my mulberry tree is full of mulberries at the time. And I just pick a few mulberries off and I say, "Here, try these." And the person stands there with these mulberries in their hand and goes, "I can really eat that? Right. Don't I have to wash it first?"
Conditioned.
And I go, "Oh my God, there's a total disconnect. People don't realize that the food that they buy in the supermarket grows the same way. It grows on a tree, or it grows on a plant. Or they think it somehow magically appears in the supermarket. They don't realize where it actually comes from. They don't think about it. It's not that they don't know intellectually, but they don't make that connection.
Because we don't see the world through green colored glasses, through green consciousness. We see the world through this chemical era of man-made consciousness, our architecture, our music, our cars. We need to go back to nature. Mother Nature is our guide. And when we start realizing where our food and how our food gets to us, and the plants that we can eat.
And the messages are there. You just have to look around, all of the signs and all of the information is all around you all the time. It's just you have to open your eyes and look.
Yeah.
And if you look and you have these realizations, you open your eyes more and more. And like when you mention Waldo, my pig, okay? Yeah. Waldo has changed my life. Yeah. I was a big meat eater. And when I realized the light and the intellect behind those eyes and what's going on in that mind, it's so next level. I would never think about eating pork ever again.
And there you go. You see, it's not about you. It's about everyone.
Yeah. And our connection to each other. When we just open ourselves up and we realize that. I mean, I've had fish that knew me. I've had turtles that knew me. My chickens are as close as my dogs and cats. And I couldn't eat a chicken as much as I could eat a dog or a cat because of our conditioning. And so plants can be the same thing. It's because most people kill plants and think they don't have a green thumb because they don't even water them. It's like they are living things, just like your pig, my children, my chickens, your rabbit. And I think that when we reestablish our environments, the animals and the whole veganism isn't because we're doing this to be ethical, but we're doing it because it's the only thing that really makes sense on a conscious level.
Yeah, and unfortunately, what's so culturally wrong with what we're doing nowadays is that we're always looking for the solution elsewhere. We're looking up.
Absolutely.
We're going, technology is going to save us. Somebody is going to come up with some technology that's going to prevent the waters from rising in South Florida. Somebody's going to come up with some technology, some chemical that we can put on
the
into
arrogance
the soil.
The arrogance of
it's
man.
the arrogance. Instead of actually looking inward and looking down at your feet and looking at the soil and touching the soil and looking for the answers there, because the answers are all right there.
Our sacred earth
Yeah,
is underneath
we don't
our feet.
need
That's
the
our
technology.
That's our church. Earth is church.
And it's what I urge people to do as an environmental capitalist. I urge people to take accountability, to take responsibility for their piece of the earth, because they have their house, they're blessed to have their nest, their house. The outside of that is going to be a lawn for their status symbol and their ego, or are they going to share the planet? Karmically, I strongly suggest that they begin to share the planet. Even if they plant one native tree, they've taken a great step in the right direction. Because if everybody in Miami planted one tree, that would be 2.5 million trees that just got planted.
It's just that simple.
It is.
It is that simple.
And
exactly.
with the natives, we have these almost endangered plants. They take this is a prickly ash, and it's a
Biscayne prickly
giant
ash.
swallowtail, which I'm a big butterfly person. The pretty ones. No, I love them all. But the thing is, they don't take a lot of water because they're native, because they really respond to the soil. And so, Bianca, what do you feel that you can do? What do you think is the most challenging, and then the best thing that somebody could do to start converting their property or even their terrace, or just what do you feel as a seasoned permaculturist?
Well, I think it's baby steps. Do what you can.
Yeah.
Don't try to convert your entire garden into an edible food forest
Then
in
you'll always
one
be
go if you
overwhelmed.
don't have any experience with it. Yeah.
Bananas.
Do bananas.
Start some
Simple,
bananas.
easy.
It's, just start with one thing, and you'll get addicted, and you'll want to grow more, and you'll want to do more, and you'll want to participate in that beautiful thing that starts to happen.
And that's in the yoga too. That's one of the sutras. That's the first sutra, was one thing at a time.
Right.
People think when they hear eco revolution or planting and gardening, they think like, oh my God, I gotta do this whole space. And like you said, just get one thing. And just like with yourself, focus on one thing you're trying to work on. You know what I mean? And that's where, like you said, the yoga and the connection is. But Miami, we don't have time for you to just do that. You got to do it at the same time. Like, get the green,
That's
but
the
get
problem with
yourself
Miami.
in and just mush them together, and do the meditation, do the yoga, do the gardening.
Yeah.
It's like what the Dutch engineers say about Miami. Miami's really out of time.
Yeah.
Like, we have 20 years of catching up to do in Miami right now this year. And we don't have time to mess around with taking a decade to get it together. We need to
Right.
change radically right now this year.
This
The
is a-
opportunity is coming to the door right now. You got to
Yeah.
be ready.
And this is why this is a revolution. Okay, this is not eco harmony. This is a revolution. This is a war
and
out
also,
there to
if
win.
someone really isn't able to devote time to making a garden and to doing all those things, then at least,
Call me.
try. Right.
Call Howard.
Call Howard. And also just vote with your wallet when you go to the store.
Yes.
Try
Yeah.
to support the companies that produce non-GMO organic things,
Right.
and just do it that way.
Home Depot
because
has a lot to answer for.
Yeah,
I
they
was
all
just
do.
shocked. I went to Home Depot a couple of days ago, and I looked at some of the plants they had, some of the flowering plants,
Just
and
junk.
The most
they are all
invasive.
junk, and they're all sprayed. They even have a little tag. Thank God they put a tag in it, because at least you can avoid it. They all are sprayed with neonics. the stuff that kills the bees.
Yeah. And this is...
These are the flowering plants, and they spray them
actually,
with the stuff that kills the bees.
If anybody from North Miami is listening, I'm actually going to be winning an award for sustainability and beautification from my city. Thank you. But I am going to, at that time, I saw this guy with a mask on and gloves and this huge thing of poison spraying, walking past a group of school children on the street, and they didn't have masks on. And this guy's working for the city. And I'm thinking, you know what? This city needs to ban the sale and the use of pesticides
and invasive plants. When you go to Home Depot, you see the most invasive plants that take over and destroy all of our native plants also.
And do you know why that is? It's pennies to the dollar, pure greed.
Yeah.
Yes.
They don't care about the environment whatsoever. One of the most incredible first lessons I learned when I started my business is I got into my business, which I guess you could call it zero-scaping business, because they wouldn't call me a landscaper. And one of the first things I learned was the landscaping business in Miami is terrible for the environment, horribly destructive for the environment.
There's a lot of little things they need to work on. So
well, even when they adhere to these 80% requirements of native plants, they're planting the same monocultures of basic stuff over and over, and we're just losing that biodiversity because you cannot sustain an ecosystem on cocoa plum and Fakahatchee grass. There's more to it than that.
And also, it comes back around, when you think of these plants, and so now you're going to get some bugs on those plants, and now you get out the insecticide, and you spray the insecticide, and you don't realize that you're killing maybe the insect that is on the plant, but the insecticide is also going to go in the soil, and it's going to kill all the beneficial stuff in the soil, and then your soil is depleted,
and then
it's just this vicious cycle that just...
I think also one thing that, we are so conditioned to beauty and we want our plants to be perfect. When you come to my garden, my cabbage and my collards have holes in it, and I have little, aphids on all my milkweed, but I refuse even the neem because I am too afraid that I will kill something. So when you are doing these landscapes, that is just part of it, but that's part of nature.
And they're just so beautiful other ways to take care of it.
Yeah.
I just got like 1,500 ladybugs to take care of this aphid infestation that I have on one of my bean plants.
Yeah. So really,
they're doing a beautiful job of it.
Yeah.
Well, lucky for them.
I want you guys to come back. Bianca and I are going to come back and talk about bee culture, and Howard is going to come back. We're going to also be doing these beehive events at both of these properties. So if you want to really get inspired, see Howard's place, see Bianca's place, and just start growing. Start with collards, bananas, sweet potatoes, and own it, man. Teach your kids. We're losing our culture when we lose our food and our native plants. So love you guys for coming on. Thank you so much
for having us.
Thank
Emily,
you, Catherine.
Thank you, honey.
Thank you.
Come back in next week. We will be talking more about soil and food. This show is dedicated to all you farmers out there that are trying to make a difference. Namaste.
Thanks for listening to Catherine B. and the Echo Revolution on SoFloRadio.com.